Welcome to the RITIS and Probe Data Analytics Suite user group. This is Joanna Riegel from KMJ Consulting, and on behalf of the I-95 Corridor Coalition, we welcome you to this morning's web meeting. Just want to go through a few housekeeping items with you. The call-in phone number is 719-867-1571, and it will be in the chat box for the duration of the event as well as the entrance code. Participants are in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. If you have questions for the audio, you can press *6. Justin Ferry is available. His mobile number is shown. It's 484-557-7009, and he can help you with any difficulties for the web or the audio. This webinar is currently being recorded, and the presentations will be posted to the I-95 Corridor Coalition website following the meeting. Participants will receive a link to the presentations after they are posted. Since all our guests are in listen-only mode, we're asking that you post any questions today through the chat box. These questions will be monitored by the coalition staff as well as our co-chairs, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation or at the end of the webinar, depending on time. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our co-chair, Jesse Burke from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. Morning, Jesse.
Morning, Joanna. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another meeting of the RITIS PDA Suite user group, and thanks for joining us today. As always, we have a really interesting agenda. Denise is going to provide some coalition updates. Then we have a couple spotlight presentations, a really interesting presentation on using PDA Suite data to conduct analysis on the impacts of automated speed enforcement in the District of Columbia, really kind of a different application that I personally haven't seen before. Really excited to try to replicate this in my region here in Philadelphia. Then we'll also hear from PennDOT because it's October and the holidays are right around the corner somehow, so we'll get a great presentation on how to use the PDA Suite for holiday travel, including operations and traveler information, and then follow that up with some tips on how to use the PDA Suite tools to make holiday travel advisories of your own. Michael Pack will provide us the latest updates on what's new and what's coming for RITIS and the PDA Suite, and then we'll conclude with our agency input session. So as always, if you have questions, comments during the presentation, please put them into the chat pod, as Joanna mentioned, and we'll get to those when we have a chance. So to introduce our speakers today, first up we're going to have Awad Abdelhalim. Awad is a fourth-year PhD student and instructor at Virginia Tech, and he's presenting for District DOT today. His PhD research focuses on intelligent transportation systems, modeling and simulation, machine learning, and connected autonomous vehicles. And during his recent internship, he worked for the District DOT as a research scientist, and he'll be sharing some of his work with us this morning. So welcome. Thank you, Awad. Next, we'll have Scott Benedict. Scott holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from Messiah College, and he's been working for Domino Technologies in Lemoyne, Pennsylvania for nearly 14 years. And during that time, he's worked full-time as a consultant for PennDOT in a variety of roles. Currently, he works as a functional architect assigned to PennDOT's TISMO Systems and Performance Unit, where his primary duties are helping to manage the department's 511 PA Traveler Information System and working as a lead on PennDOT's TISMO Performance Metrics program. He's been working with VPP and the PDA Suite for almost 10 years, and he always has really great work to share, so thanks, Scott, for being with us today. Rick Ayers is with the University of Maryland CATT Lab as a public sector advocate. Mr. Ayers has over 30 years of experience working with location-based enterprise software systems at the federal, state, and local level. In his current role with the CATT Lab, he supports state and local transportation agencies in the successful integration and deployment of the Regional Integrated Transportation Information System, which of course we all affectionately refer to as RITIS, partly because, man, that's a mouthful. Mr. Ayers has also worked extensively with the I-95 Corridor Coalition member agencies, including US DOT and FHWA, to support and manage their respective enterprise implementations of real-time probe data deployment. And finally, we have Michael Pack. Michael, of course, is the director of the CATT Lab at the University of Maryland, where he works to make transportation data more easily accessible and usable by operations planners and researchers. And he's previously worked at the University of Virginia and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. We're very grateful and fortunate to have him running the CATT lab these days. So thank you, Michael. We also have quite a number of participants today. I think we have over 150 people representing folks all up and down the East Coast, the South, the Midwest, New England, all kinds of different agencies. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I think you'll really get a lot out of these presentations. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Denise Markow for the coalition update. Denise, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Jesse. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All righty. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just a very quick update on what the coalition is working on these days. As you know, we sponsor the user group meetings. These are one of our most popular events. We have a lot of great information and a lot of great presentations. But just to keep you apprised of some of the other work that we are doing, recently we held what we call a HOGS, which is a Highway Operation Group Resiliency Exchange. And that was a group of folks from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland who came together, worked through what they called a severe weather event scenario, 24 inches of snow in 18 hours, tractor-trailer accidents, what do you do? So it was kind of a hands-on, how do you prepare, how do you respond, how do you recover? And we had about 60 folks in the room working that out, with the deliverable being a matrix of how states manage and work through their response protocols. We had an arterial management webinar. I believe that's one of our largest participated webinars we've had to date. We had 3 speakers. Awad was from New York City DOT. He spoke on the pilot studies that are being done with transit signal priorities in New York City. We had Shoma Day from DC, who talked about some of the TSMO strategies, such as parking restrictions or bus-only lanes, or curb-only pickup in D.C., how that was working. And then finally, we finished it up with Raj Panaluri from Florida DOT, who talked about their statewide arterial management plan. Some of the other states, we had a VTM steering committee. As you know, that's a project where we are working on real-time volumes and how to access that and use that in planning and operations. We have had a WAYS technical working group webinar. We have developed a working group of power contributors, top contributors, power users, broad-based users of WAYS, working on developing some sort of product, what I call a product roadmap, that we're going to be working with WAYS on helping to improve the platform for operational procedures, particularly in TMCs. And then lastly, we had a CAV webinar on September 26th, talking about regulating the unknown, balancing safety, promoting innovation. We had Joe Segali from Vermont to talk about some of the work that they're doing up there. So a lot going on. Upcoming, we have also a continuation of our WAYS technical working group. We are working on developing what we call a heavy towing exchange in New England, to how to deal with tractor-trailer accidents relative to mostly snow, but up there. But again, it could be any other type of event as well. And then we have our VTM steering committee, another steering committee webinar coming up in November. A lot done, a lot going on. As you can tell, please email me if there's any interest or you want to forward this information on. And that's about it on my end. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this back over to Awad.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the introductions, Jesse and Denise. Without further ado, I will proceed with my presentation. Again, this is work that I've done with the District Department of Transportation starting this summer. It's an exploratory analysis on the impacts of automated speed enforcement in the District of Columbia. So just quick introduction to the background. I was working and still am working with the Vision Zero program at DDOT, and the target for Vision Zero at DDOT and many other state departments of transportation currently is achieving zero traffic fatalities for DDOT and DDOT's Vision Zero. The aim is to reach that by 2024. More recently, DDOT's looking more into, the target is zero tolerance to any kind of traffic accidents by that time. So there have been a myriad of safety measures, projects, both physical and within the systems controlling the traffic, to reach that target as a district. And for this study, what we wanted to do is examine automated speed enforcement and its role in achieving Vision Zero goals. So all speed cameras and red light cameras, all automated enforcement measures are run through MPD, the police department, and not through the district. We got data from them, data from a couple of other sources, and tried to see if those measures really do have an impact on safety. So quick intro to the data sources. There is plenty of data, of course, in transportation, and this study really we got to explore and play around with a lot of sources of data shown here in this table. We have the crashes data set. It's available for the most part through DC's open data portal, but PDOT also has a third-party contractor, PSI, Precision Systems Inc., who do a lot of processing on the data. They double check the crashes with the actual records and whatnot to ensure that all the information are right, especially the location data. So we use that over the open data. MPD provided us with locations, geolocations of all the cameras. The citations, we have access to all citations that have been issued starting from 2013 in the district. And through PDA suite, we're able to get travel speeds in specific segments we're interested in through INRIX data. So again, break down the PSI crash data set basically is a crash data set, geolocations, time and date, severity, the vehicles involved in the crashes, and all that stuff. We have the camera locations and citation data. That's through MPD. Again, that's starting from pretty much start of 2013 until June of 2019. So the data was very recent when we started the study. And it has hourly counts of vehicles passing, speeds, the violations, and if any citations were issued during that time. And through the prop vehicle data in INRIX, we got the speed data. So we do get speeds from traffic camera data as well, but this is the speed that we get is really only the speed post installing the camera. We wanted to also compare, see if there is any behavioral shift in the speed before and after. So this is where the prop data analytics came very useful. We had access to tons of data on the speeds on specific segments we're interested in prior to having cameras there that were monitoring those segments. So just quick issues that we ran into. First of all, we see here we have a couple of heat maps here. This is all the crashes that happen in DC. Again, as we would imagine, most of the crashes occur within the downtown area. We have a little bit on the beltways around in and out of DC. Over here, we have the speeds that were reported as resulting from crashes that are resulting from speed. The circles indicate all the speed camera locations. Blue circles are the only locations that we considered. So we see that very, very few number of crashes, only 2.6% of crashes are reported as resulting to speed. And this is mainly because of the arterial system in DC. When we talk to MPD about this, because the national average is about 26% according to NHTSA, it's basically because, the speeds are very low within those arterials. There is high congestion. So when the police officers arrive to crash sites, there is usually enough strong evidence suggesting that this is resulting from speed. So using speed as a measure was very tricky, of course, so we decided not to look at it as reductions of speed-related crashes. We looked really at all crashes. The reason we ended up with 29 sites out of 84 active sites currently in DC is we had some issues with the data quality and reporting from MPD. So we can see whether through the open data portal or through PSI's records over here, the crashes prior to the year 2015 were severely underreported, and we know it's underreported because we have the actual numbers of crashes, and the numbers of crashes in the database are just way too low. And again, MPD had issues with reporting their crashes. They changed their system in August 2015, so we see a lot of consistency from 2015 through 2018 up to 2019 to date, which was to June when we started this. So we only restricted our study to the last 3 years, and thus we included most of the locations that were there prior to that. We ended up only with 29 locations. This is a breakdown of the crashes. Again, we see that most of the crashes that take place are property damage crashes, injury crashes. Fatal crashes, which are usually a really good measure in those kinds of studies, are very low in DC, which is a really good problem to have. But this, again, does not give us the flexibility of seeing the effect of those of the automated speed enforcement in reducing fatal crashes, just because there is more or less about 30 plus or minus fatal crashes per year. So very quick run through the methodology. I can take more questions on that later. I wouldn't want to go too technical here, but we ended up taking all the crashes that happened in the district from 1st of January 2016 until June 31st of this year. We have 29 locations. Everything was done running in a code in a background in Python. It's a brute force application. We had all crashes to all 29 locations. And for each camera location, we had a range of interest that was predefined based on the location of the camera, the topographical characteristics, and the speed limit being enforced. Those ranges were typically 400 to 750 feet before and after the speed camera. And once vehicles or crashes are identified within that range, again, the script goes in and retrieves the vehicle information just to make sure that the vehicles that initiated the crash were traveling in the direction of the speed enforced. So those people have seen the enforced or photo enforced plate. We did this basically for all the 29 locations a year before and a year after, just to compare the statistics for those 3 years. And looked into 3 things here. First of all was the before and after crash statistics. We see here all the crashes in the 29 locations before installation, a year after installation, and we see decrease in all categories of crashes, all crashes, property damage, and injury collisions. We definitely saw much more evident reduction in severe injury collisions, but we still don't have that reported just because, again, MPD changed the way that they report severe crashes. So this is, again, under internal review, but the numbers are very, very statistically significant when we look at the data. When we compare all those to all the other locations that did not have any enforcement measure between the, again, year-to-year statistics, we don't see any trend in that. So we see an evident decrease in the locations where we had enforcement, and there is really hardly plus or minus very miniature number in all of their locations. So this really shows us the effect that those cameras have in terms of traffic safety and crash reduction. Second thing we looked at is citations. We have a total of over 7 million citations in the 7 years from 2013 to 2019, and this is out of well over 743 million vehicle passes through those cameras, so more or less a citation percentage of 0.97. For those 29 locations, what we see here and what we see basically pretty much even for the cameras that were installed prior to that is we see that all cameras start citing pretty much about 1% of the drivers initially, but this percent decays with time. So the number of drivers, although usually we have the daily traffic increasing through the years, which is basically the very normal trend, but we see the percentage of drivers cited decreasing. So this really hinted us that there is a behavior change, that there is a speed reduction that's really happening around the corridor, not just at the specific camera location. So we wanted to examine that a bit more. There are definitely some more notorious locations in DC. A lot of the participants today would probably be familiar with some of those. We picked this specific one over here in 295 south of Pennsylvania Avenue. And this location started with a citation percent of almost 2.5%. So that's a really high citation percentage compared to other sites, and especially when you consider it's 295 and there's just way too much traffic driving through. Other locations like this one here on New York Avenue, South Dakota Avenue, also very notorious locations, high citation rate. So we wanted to explore those and see the speeds that were happening before and after, and if there's any change in that. Here we had the PDA suite, very, very useful. We look at the data here. You can see through this little graphic here that we have the box plots, the red basically for the speed distribution before enforcing the camera, that's a year before by hour, and we have the blues for a year after. The speed being enforced is demonstrated by this line. It's enforcing a 50 mile per hour speed. So drivers get cited once they start driving past 61%, past 61 miles per hour, sorry. And we see that pretty much during free flow time over here, early in the morning, a little bit late at night, we see that the 95th percentile is definitely way above of that. So this really tells us prior to installing the camera, had we looked at this, we would maybe be able to figure out how many of the drivers are going to get cited there. We see significant reduction in speed, so pretty much the average goes down to about 50 miles per hour, which is the desired speed rate by enforcement, right after installing the camera, which is a pretty good thing to do, to see. But we also see very, very significant reduction in the 95th percentile pretty much during all hours of day. So those speeders are really going down through time. We look at this again in terms of numbers. We see that the average speed decreases, the standard deviation significantly decreases. What we're most interested in when we looked at the data here was the 95th percentile, because those are the people we presume are going to be cited, or the higher percentiles. We see that prior to enforcement, the 95th percentile was going at 63%, 63 miles per hour, sorry. So had we looked at the data prior to installing this camera, we would know that if no one complies, we would have a citation percentage of 5% at least, because that's the number of drivers who are speeding. And when we look again at the citations that we have in this location, it started at 2.5%. So this is really good compliance rate, maybe 50%, not the best, but it's a really good application of maybe we can use the data from the speed to kind of estimate compliance rate for those locations, which would be a really good thing. And as we see now, after enforcement, the 99th percentile are driving at 61 miles per hour. So even 1% are not getting cited. We're citing slightly less than 1%. Again, when we look at the citation that we have today, about 0.6 or 0.5% of the drivers are getting cited. So again, the data really, really gives a lot of information about citations here. Last thing we wanted to do, kind of like to aggregate all this, we developed kernel density estimates, fancier way of saying probability density functions for the speed in this location. So we see the red is the speed distribution before enforcement, blue is after. We see this really, really nice shift from the average speed and higher speeds moving towards 50 miles per hour, which is being enforced here. Is a really good thing. Interesting enough, we see the same trend. So this is a year-to-year comparison, but we see almost identical comparison on monthly and quarterly prior to enforcement and after to enforcement. So what this really enforces, kind of gives us an indication of, is the speed change, the change in speeding behavior happens really, really at shorter times. So again, maybe a good measure that we're going to be looking forward for this is we will be suggesting new locations to MPD and kind of seeing if we start decreasing the speeds gradually. Would this, would we have a lower citation percentage and then continually lower the speed instead of enforcing a speed that will result in high citation percentage? And again, this is an ongoing work. We'll see the outcomes of this analysis with the selection of new sites and kind of gradually decreasing the speed instead of enforcing a speed that will result in high citations. A little bit, just to avoid the speed trap label that those cameras are getting. So again, I ran through this very, very quickly. Didn't want to overstep my time. But if we have time for a few questions, I can happily answer those.
Thanks, Awad. That was really interesting. So it looks like we did get a couple questions coming in through the chat pod. So let me read through those. Mina Lockwood has a couple of questions. First, she was asking if you saw the same reductions where the posted speed limit was lower. So for example, locations where the speed limit was maybe 35 or 25 miles an hour. Did you analyze those types of locations, and did you see similar reductions?
Oh yeah, we looked at those, and that's a really good question. We looked at those. We see the similar reduction, but of course the reduction is not as evident as you see it. Drivers in this location, let's say we're driving 20 miles above the speed limit. It's enforcing 50. People were driving well above 70. So you see very, very significant reductions because, again, it's more or less it's an interstate. Most of the locations that we are enforcing actually do have the 35 and 25 miles per hour, but people are driving more or less about 30 to 35, let's say, on a 25. So you see the reduction. Yes, the reduction is very evident. And again, not necessarily year to year, but quarter to quarter, month to month, we see reduction happening, which is a really good trend. There are some locations in DC, like the K Street Tunnel, 3rd Street Tunnel. Those are enforcing 25, but the speeds on those tunnels prior to enforcement were significantly higher. So again, in those locations, yes, we see significant reductions happening in speed. And I see another question also from Mina regarding how many fatalities were speed related. I really don't have that number at the back of my head, but again, it's very tricky because technically in in an arterial where we're enforcing 25 miles per hour, crashes resulting from speeds of 30, 35 miles per hour are speed related in that context, but they are not reported as speed related because when an officer comes and cars crashed at 30 miles per hour, there's no strong evidence to suggest that speed was involved. So we can find the number from the data that we have, yes, but it's very tricky because speed is definitely underreported in this case.
Interesting. Another data-related question that Mina had is she was asking if the whisker plot that you showed represented just one TMC, and if you could maybe go back to that slide and maybe also just walk through what that whisker plot shows. I mean, I know I look at these a lot, but I'm not sure if everyone understands what the different data points are that are shown in this graph. So maybe if you could quickly walk through that and then just talk about whether it's one TMC or a group of TMCs.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is one TMC. It's the speed for the TMC. We have it, the one for this camera location at DC 295 south of Penn Avenue. So this is one location. And the box plot here basically shows the reds show the speeds before. So again, this is the minimum speed. Here we have the 25th percentile. Median is indicated by this circle in the little bit here. 75th percentile and 95th percentile of speed. Broken down by hour. So again, this is showing us the speed variation or the distribution of speed, how it changed by hour. Red again before enforcement and the blue is after enforcement. But this is all for one location for this specific camera that we chose to highlight for the sake of this presentation. In our study, we're looking at multiple locations. We kind of see definitely same trends, more or less. Sometimes we find out that there is speed change just because of construction or because there was something happening, but here we know that this site was did not have any things that impact the speed significantly other than the cameras for that time period that we're interested in, so we only highlighted this time.
And can you just confirm what the posted speed limit was at that location? I think it was 50, is that
50
correct?
miles per hour. Yeah, 50 miles per hour is the indicated by this line is the posted speed, and citations begin with this yellow line over here. So above 61, 11 miles per hour above speed limit is when you start getting citations.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a similar program in Philadelphia on a challenging arterial, so I think it'll be interesting to see if we can replicate some of this to see how that's working once it gets implemented. So thanks a lot for sharing. I don't see any other questions related to this presentation in the pod right now, so I think maybe we will move on to the next presentation if there aren't any other questions. But thank you, Awad. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'll walk us ahead here. Right. So next, I'll turn it over to Scott Benedict from PennDOT to talk about some analysis PennDOT's been doing, put out information for holiday travel and how that's been showing some real benefits. So Scott, turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Scott.
Okay. All right. So what I've been asked to do is PennDOT, for the last number of years, has been using the PDA suite and our archive speed data to provide us with a number of benefits for around holiday travel, both in terms of our operations and preparedness for that, and in terms of travel information. So I'm just going to walk you through both those scenarios as we go forward this morning. First thing we'll talk through is just using historical trend maps from the PDA as traffic forecasts. We do that for holidays, and I'll also highlight a couple other special events that we're making use of that kind of data for. And then also we've been using the PDA suite to plan for holiday operations, most notably some initiatives we're taking around Thanksgiving travel. First thing to talk through is our holiday travel forecast, which we provide on our 511 Pennsylvania travel information website. We provide historical traffic forecasts on traditional travel holidays. Memorial Day and Labor Day, we do the Friday, we give forecasts for the Friday before and the Monday holiday. And then for Thanksgiving, we do forecasting for the Wednesday before and the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Basically, these are the travel holidays that don't move around the calendar. We've tried to do things, we've thought about doing things for 4th of July, but because the 4th of July is on a different day every year, you have to go back to get the exact scenarios. You have to, you only get one good example of the holiday being on a certain day of the week every few years. So that doesn't really lend itself to what we're able to do. We've been providing these going back to Thanksgiving 2015. That was actually, we have PennDOT purchases index data statewide through the BPP project, and that was the first year which we had started doing that. So when Thanksgiving came up, we decided that we wanted to start providing this information to the public as best we could. We traditionally will display our traffic forecast on 501 Pennsylvania starting the Monday before the holiday, just to give people opportunities to plan for their travel. We provide, we have 501 PA has 8 different regions across the state. Those are actually our calling regions to the IVR, but we utilize them on the website as well. And so we provide a traffic forecast using a trend map out of the PDA suite for each of those regions. It's for our core network roadways only. Now, what our core network is, it's essentially our limited access network, but basically includes almost all the limited access roads in the state, although there are some sections of limited access sections of certain roads that don't connect up to anything, so they're not on there. And there's also some arterial sections that are, located such on certain roads that it wouldn't make sense to remove them from the core network, but it's primarily our limited access network. We provide trend maps for the dates that we're forecasting on, looking at the prior 2 years. We utilize for these maps, we utilize comparative speeds. I've had some questions in the past as to why we don't just show, straight congestion. That was certainly something we considered, but we decided that for the holiday traffic, what we were most interested in highlighting to people was where things were worse than normal. For instance, in Harrisburg, we have, it's always bad on in the afternoon on a Wednesday. We want to make sure that we're using comparative speeds to show people not only that maybe it's worse than normal in the normal areas, but also then making sure we're highlighting places where it wouldn't normally be congested, but it is. We do hourly granularity, so the trend maps move by hour. Makes that just an easier roll-up for the people to look at. Along with that, along with the trend maps, in the last year we started making an effort to collect any known roadwork restrictions for the interstate in each region, and also we'll advertise those on the page as well. We do try and keep the roads as clear as possible, but you can't always do that, so we do try and make people as aware as possible of what they might run into, especially since those are reasons that the conditions might be worse than normal than we're showing in our forecast. So the process I go through, and this is at this point, this is something I pretty much do for each holiday, as I have already done once. We have saved PMC sets in the PDA suite for each region, and so we'll go through and generate trend maps for each region for the day, for each day that we're forecasting for the 2 years prior, and then we now download those movie files. I will send those along to our 501 vendor, along with a list of interstate restrictions. We had a lot of initial setup in terms of getting our page set up the way we wanted it for 511 and putting our processes together. But after this initial setup, typically takes me less than an hour to set up to get these trend maps ready and sent off for our subsequent holidays. So again, when we manage this all through our 511, it's not, in our case, it's not going up on a department maintained page. I mean, our 501 system is maintained by an outside vendor. And then as far as how we get the word out, what we do with it publicly, our press, this is just part of our standard processes and our standard press release that our press office sends out, in advance of the holiday travel. And so that goes out to make people aware that this service is available. Just wanted to hear, show you an example of one of these. This is for the State College region. This is the one we just did for Labor Day. And it is the, you can see, we'll show you, the 2 years prior. If you can't do it here, but if you click on play, then it'll run through every hour. You'll see the traffic conditions change. Down at the right, in the bottom right corner there, you can see the list of the interstate restrictions that are in place for the State College region. And then that is what you can use for your holiday traffic forecasting. Again, obviously, things can change from year to year, but this does give people a good picture of where the hotspots are and allows them to plan their travel. We also do this kind of, provide this kind of information for other events. We do for certain regional events. We have special dedicated traveler information pages. One example is the Pennsylvania Farm Show that occurs in January in Harrisburg every year. For this, you know, it's over 2 weekends in the intervening week, so we provide trend maps for each day of the farm show for the last 3 years. We do similarly for the Little League World Series in Williamsport, PA. For the 10 days of that, we again go back and we'll give you the option to look each day of the event to look at what the traffic was doing in the Williamsport area for each year for the 3 years prior. Building off of this, as we were doing the holiday traffic forecast, I noticed in particular that there were some things that were happening consistently every year in certain areas. And so following on in 2016, we started asking, okay, you know, where can we find places where we know that there's going to be issues that occur over the holiday weekend because they occur every year, and if we can find these places, then what can we do about them? And so at that point, our statewide traffic management center personnel, our operators, and our managers over here began looking at historical trend maps for statewide, looking at a regional level and look at trend maps and congestion scans to identify historical issues. And then in coordination with our regional traffic management centers, they prepared operational responses that were designed to hopefully alleviate some of these traffic hotspots over the holidays and see if there was something we could do about these now that we knew they were coming. And so there's 2 of these that I want to just highlight that have probably been the ones that we've done the most and have seen the most success. The first one of these is I-78 westbound and I-81 southbound approaching Harrisburg the Sunday after Thanksgiving. You can, so I just have provided you with the map here to take a look. Basically, what we would constantly be seeing is a significant I-87 runs into I-81 here as you're westbound going south, and then we would see backups all throughout this area into Harrisburg and get significant backups onto 78. One thing I'll highlight here before I move on to my next slide is you can also then see, starting back beyond at about exit 8 here on I-78 West, US 22 is a route that the primarily limited access route that runs parallel to I-81 or to these portions of 78 and 81 down into Harrisburg, at which point you could get up onto 83 and then continue on 81, which will allow you to bypass these issues that we were having consistently. And so the issue here was, as I said, it was just significant backups due to oversaturation. There wasn't any particular pain point we could just relieve. So the operational response was to encourage travelers to use US 20 through travelers that are traveling south of Harrisburg to use 22 as an alternate route. We utilized DMS messages with comparative travel times to let people know, which travel time was faster at the time. We put up HAR messages. And then also the last stretch of 22 coming into Harrisburg is actually an arterial section that's signalized. So we were able to utilize adaptive signals to manage the traffic on that arterial section so that we didn't just run everybody into a major backup in the Harrisburg area once they were coming down. And so looking at the impact here, this is the congestion scan now. The way the congestion scan produced this, it moves 2014 and 2015, the last 2 years that we did this are over here. This is 2014 and then 2015, and then the subsequent years, 16, 17, 18. What you can see is, and it's a little bit masked to some extent because 2015 we actually had a year where we didn't have any incidents in this targeted area. We were very fortunate, and in the subsequent years since then we have had multiple incidents throughout the day that have caused backups, but you can see the significant, the thing that you can see most significantly is the amount of time that we've reduced that the backup has stretched on to 78, and the lack of the severity level of that. And you can also generally, and especially when you factor in the fact that we've had multiple incidents on all these days, you can even see a relieving of the congestion on 81 as well. And we have looked at things like user delay costs and travel times and seen significant reductions in all of that, especially when you factor in the fact that we have had incidents here, these years when we didn't have incidents in the 2015 year. The other one I wanted to highlight here is we had a location on I-80 westbound as we approached I-99. The issue here was this is not actually a direct interchange directly from I-80 to I-99. You have to end up getting off and then going on to 220 briefly, and then in terms of the limited access interstate area. And so what happens is people were coming up to this intersection right here. That's actually, previously that was not a signalized intersection. I believe it is now, but the traffic would have to stop and wait, if there was any passing traffic coming up to that intersection. And so what would inevitably happen on the day after Thanksgiving is that, or the Sunday after Thanksgiving, is that traffic would, from this ramp, would back up onto I-80 and cause significant backlogs, miles of backlogs on that day in the afternoon. And so the response to this was that our Central Region Regional Traffic Management Center actually initiated a flagging operation during the times where we identified that there were issues, to any time if the queue traffic would start to build up on the ramp, on the off-ramp, they would then stop traffic coming the other direction and flag the traffic out from that ramp out onto the road and let them go to prevent the queues from backing up onto the interstate. We also provided DMS messaging to encourage through travelers to take alternate routes to get off at the prior exit and be able to go around and be able to route around. And this one, again, you can see the impact is completely, we almost completely have eliminated it. Again, this is just like with the first one, 2014 sits here, 2015 sits here, and you can see, that's a 10-mile TMC. So, I don't think we literally had 10 miles of backlogs, but we would have backlogs that were in that segment that were deep enough to lower the average segment speed of the entire segment significantly. We would see that for both those years. And then you can see in 2016, we almost completely eliminated it, or we completely eliminated, you can't even see any congestion, and you just have just a little bit of slower speeds in that segment. In that segment for the prior years, but again, you can just see what the impact of that flagging operation has been, and in the way we were able to identify this as an area for improvement and put our operational response about that had a real effect on traffic in that area. So that is all that I have. So I will gladly take any questions now, or if you have any follow-up questions, my information does not. You feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be glad to discuss it with you.
Definitely great information there. If anybody has questions, go ahead and type them in now. It's really great, I think, to see the impact that you're able to show with the congestion scans there. It really justifies the effort. I guess one question I had was just sort of about kind of how much lead time do you need to prepare some of these analyses and figure out a solution? And also, how did you identify some of these historical issues? Was that just you, or was that staff at each of the traffic management centers kind of looking at their individual areas?
Yes, my recollection is just when this started in 2016, when we first came, this started as just something I identified. I was pulling through against another announcement. I think I was getting ready for the Thanksgiving traffic holiday report, pulling that data way in advance that year, and I just noticed the IA-78, IA-81 thing. I may have even been researching it because I remember getting caught in it, and noticed that it was consistent going back at that time 3 or 4 years. At that point, I think we had data back to 2011, And I think this was 2016, so we had 4 years of data. We had 5 years of data, and you were consistently seeing that every year. And so I kind of pointed that out to some of my chain. And so we, basically had this idea of, okay, well, we know this is going to happen. What can we do about it? And then we expanded it. So I would say the first time we did that operational response, which at what point what we did was, as I said, we kind of involved our statewide traffic management center, who, they look region by region for issues using the historical trends and the congestion scan. They looked for issues and then reached out and consulted with our regional traffic management centers, for what could be done, where they were identifying. They worked with them to also identify these areas. So I would say the first time we did this, I think we were working on it, probably a couple months before the holiday to identify things and do and have the response. Now, I know, each year now they're probably, because a lot of this stuff is, they know what they're going to do, and, I don't know, a lot of new things have cropped up. Now I think there's a lot, it's probably more like, the month before the holiday they start to prepare. And I know they've also done some of these issues, particularly I know the 7881 issue pops up at some of these other travel holidays, and I know they've kind of replicated some of that on those holidays as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, having driven through that area, I could see how you might, it can often be a problem. So it, demonstrates how you can really use data to back up some of the local knowledge that folks have just from knowing their area. Another question that came in related to kind of how you did the comparisons was just some clarification about what did you mean when you looked at the previous 2 years? So, for example, if you're looking at 2019 and comparing to previous years, did you look at 2018 and 2017 separately, or do you combine those together somehow? How do you sort of do that looking back?
I should have highlighted that a little more when I had the actual example up there, but we provide 2017 and 2018. So if there was some major incident that occurred in 2018, you would see that separate from 2017.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it does help to see those incidents, folks who've used the congestion scan, especially when you're looking at one day like that, sometimes, an incident can make quite a difference. And then another kind of clarification question from Ram, just asking, in the last slide, the TMC that you showed seemed to be around 12 miles. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I said 10. I mean, TMC is roughly, typically what you have with TMC is that you have a TMC in the area of the ramp and then of the ramp, and then otherwise it's exit to exit, and there's just I-80 is a rural highway, and so there's I don't know if it's 10. I think I was saying 10. I don't know sure exactly, but it's 10 to 12 miles between those exits, and so yes, that's a really long TMC segment.
Interesting. Thank you. Looks like we have one more question. We have a question from Ria, but I think I might hold this one for a little bit later in the agency discussion section. So I think with that, we've answered the questions for Scott's presentation. So now I think we can move on to Rick Ayers' presentation, which will really get into some of the details of how you can use the PDA suite tools to make your own holiday travel advisories. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Rick.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Excellent. Well, as a follow-on to some of the terrific work that Scott and his team at PennDOT is doing, I wanted to share with the user community some of the resources that the CATT Lab makes available to you to support the implementation of similar holiday travel guides within your respective agencies. So the CATT Lab product team, they do a terrific job at kind of organizing and providing help system documentation to you, the users. If you're familiar at all with the RITIS help system, PDA help system in particular, you know that there's a number of topics. They're organized into these accordion folders on the left, but one of those topics is templates. You click that accordion folder, it expands, and the first option there in that folder list is the holiday traveler information and templates guides. So and it takes you to this landing page. If you dive in and look a little closer at the top of that template page, you're going to see 3 templates that are provided to you. These are PowerPoint templates. One of those is from the CATT lab itself, and compliments to our friends from Georgia DOT. They've revised our original template and offered up to the user community a couple of additional templates for you to download and use. All of these templates, again, are
Rick, I think we lost your audio there. Not hearing you right now. Bear with us, everyone. I think we lost Rick. Just going to work to get him back here.
And Jesse, make sure he goes back to the slide that we lost the audio on, okay?
Okay, thanks.
I don't think he can hear us. I'm guessing he's not. He's talking and just moving on. Why don't I take over for Rick since he's silent
That'll be great.
for now?
Yeah.
Okay. See if we start fighting with each other for control of the slides. So just a reminder that there are a lot of resources on the website already. Links that you can download the actual PowerPoint files to do these things on your own. I think most everyone on this slide on the call has seen these before, but Georgia has done a nice job of kind of updating them and making them look different for their needs and really improve them in many ways. So please feel free to download these and do your own thing with them. And just some more views of these, and Rick and I are now fighting for control, so maybe we need to kick Rick off if you have the ability to do that. Okay, thanks.
He's gone.
All right, brutal.
Not really. He's just a participant now.
Okay. so anyway, GDOT, created multiple versions of these as well. There's not just one, and you can go back and listen to GDOT's presentation on their implementation of this on the I-95 Corridor Coalition's YouTube channel. There's a presentation of him talking about this. All right, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Rick or the support team at the CATT lab, and we'll help you out.
Thanks for stepping in there, Michael. Very smooth.
So moving on, I'm going to go over now some of the new things that have been deployed recently in RITIS, and talk briefly about some of the stuff that's upcoming. We continue to make a lot of enhancements to the way in which we produce the speed tiles that are on the RITIS map. And one complaint we've heard from a lot of people is, I can't see enough roads lit up when I'm zoomed out. So we've changed the amount of roads now that are visible at different zoom levels. There's still some tweaking we probably need to do on this, but it should be better than it was. There's also some speed improvements that we've made as well. But send us your feedback if you think it's too many now, or if you still think it's too few, let us know. And we are working to try to customize the tiles so that you can set your own zoom level, but that's got a little work to be done on it yet. Now, VDOT just provided us their FITM plans, their new FITM plans, and this shouldn't be interesting to anyone other than VDOT, but the reason I'm mentioning it is that we are happy to take your evacuation plan documents and your FITM plans. FITM stands for Freeway Incident Traffic Management Plans, and we'll put those in the RITIS site for you so that they're readily available when you have an emergency, or just need to get this information out to a lot of people. For those who don't know what FITM plans are, that's essentially whenever you've got a location on the road that becomes blocked, then there's a pre-thought out plan for how to actually detour people around that particular region. And it tells you how many signs you need to put, where you need to put the signs. It might even tell you how to retime the traffic signals as appropriate. Go check these out. You can turn them on and view them in Virginia and in Maryland and DC. And again, if you've got some, send them to us. We'll update them for you. We've just updated some of the transit capabilities in the system as well. So now you can go in and you can view the real-time location of transit vehicles if we're ingesting your transit data. So here we're showing all of the buses in the Baltimore region. I've turned all of those on. In addition to just seeing where the buses are, you can click on a bus, and each time you click on it, it then tells you, what particular route it is, what its previous stop was, what its speed is. So this one right here is traveling 23 miles per hour. It's heading eastbound. And then it's hard to see, but each one of these little icons also has an arrow on it. Let me zoom in a little bit further here. So the bus has an icon, a little arrow that tells you which direction it is traveling along that particular route. You can see that. And if you don't want to see the buses, you can just turn on the individual routes and see those, and putting your mouse over a particular route will give you some information about what route it is. And then you can also view just the stops. So now we're looking at individual stops. Putting your mouse over a stop tells you what that particular stop is, maybe which routes feed it. And then you can also view the routes and the stops together, which is helpful. And of course, you can throw everything together all at once. So routes, stops, and the real-time bus locations. It can get a little overwhelming because there is quite a lot of transit routes that are out there, at least in the Baltimore region. So anyway, go check that out. It's part of the layer list over on the right-hand side. You have to turn on the public transit layer, and you have to go in and define some filters to tell it which layers you want to see within the transit layer. But it's neat. And if your agency or the region that you represent has transit feeds that you think we ought to be investigating to integrate, please send us some information about how to get access to those, and we'll start to work to integrate them. We've also made some updates to the event query tool, specifically related to the heat mapping. So if you've ever used the event query tool, you know that you can run a query, and here I ran a query for the month of September, or most of the month of September, for VDOT, and it's showing me that there is a little over 18,000 events in the state, and you can create a heat map. And the white zones are, the highest concentration of events, and the blue are lower concentrations. What's interesting about these heat maps is they are zoom level dependent. So as I start to zoom in, you'll see that the heat map changes and updates to recolor itself based on how far you've zoomed into a particular area. And this may be desired functionality for some people, but other folks want the heat maps or the clustering to be the same regardless of what zoom level you're at. So now we've implemented a new feature. We call it fixed clustering or gridding, where you can go in and at the very top of the screen, you can define a cell size. So here I've defined a cell size as 25 by 25 miles. And it produces a grid that goes over top of your map. and then it recolors the grid based on how many incidents are in each one. So here I put my mouse over this grid, tells me there are 355 events in that particular grid. And as you zoom in, the grid stays at that 25 by 25 cluster. Here's just a zoomed in version of the grid size. So I'm set to 25 by 25 right now. But you can go and you can adjust that. So now I've dropped it down to 6 by 6 miles. You can go even further if you want. Here I'm at that 6 by 6 mile zoom level. Now I've dropped it down to 1 by 1 mile zoom level. Now it starts to look a little bit more like a heat map, just with different colors. We're using all orange right now. And you can see the clustering in the cities. And as I start to zoom in, it's going to maintain that 1 by 1 mile gridding. That's with the event query tool. We've also gone in and we have we've gone in and updated some of the visualizations for the signal performance measures tools that are in the Probe Data Analytics Suite. So in addition to the existing visualizations, we now have a new scatter plot visualization that will show you the changes in performance for different signalized corridors. We also have what's called a delta chart. These are all charts that were originally developed by Purdue, their signal performance measures group, and just different ways to view the signal performance measures. We've also deployed a brand new reliability dashboard widget. This one allows you to create your own corridors, and for each one of those corridors, you can then choose a comparative date range. So maybe I want to compare this month's performance or last year's performance or last quarter's performance to the same month the prior year, the prior month. You know, these change based on what you select for your temporal comparison there. You know, then the dashboard will give you some sense of whether or not the reliability on that particular corridor is getting better or getting worse. Here we can see everything got a little bit worse for the 3 corridors we chose for this. And just a reminder that this is just one of many dashboard widgets that are available to you. You still got the speed and travel time and the ranked bottleneck widgets, which both use live data. And then there's a user delay cost, a ranked bottleneck comparison, and your MAP 21 performance measures dashboard widgets that are available as well. The bottleneck ranking tool, for those of you who use that regularly, you'll notice that you no longer need a flash player for the bottleneck ranking tool. So we've completely modernized all the Probe Data Analytics tools now. No more flash is required, which is great. But in addition to modernizing the flash components, we've also gone in and updated the tool in other ways. So now there's an add visualization button that you can click, which will allow you to create multiple visualization panels. Let me go in and show you an example. So before, you'd only be able to see 2 visualizations at a time. It defaults to the map and then the other visualizations, usually the time spiral or the timeline. Now you can change what's visible in those like you could before, but you can also add multiple visualizations. So you can have up to 5 visualizations visible at the same time in one screen. If you've got a larger monitor with higher resolution, this will be particularly useful for you. There's also some new time zone selection features in the bottleneck ranking tool. You can go in and ensure that the results are always coming back to you in the time zone in which that segment exists, or you can choose to see the results displayed in a particular time zone. Now, this isn't too important for most of the East Coast states, but there's one state in particular, Florida, that exist in 2 time zones, and they frequently need to be able to specify how they want the results to be displayed for the bottleneck ranking. So that's now a feature, and that'll affect some folks that are outside the East Coast as well. There's a lot of XD improvements that we've made along the way related to how roads are ordered, how exits and interchanges are mapped and made available for selection. I've also made some updates for how HOV lanes and other discrete parallel routes are both visualized and accessible to you in the tools. And then there's over 30 additional smaller bug fixes and annoyances that we've updated as well. And if you want to know more about those, within the Probe Data Analytics Suite, there's always this What's New flag that's in the upper right-hand corner. If you click on that, that'll open up a page that gives you more details about pretty much everything that I just went over in the slide deck here. I mention it every time I give one of these presentations. I'm going to mention it again. It's really important for your agency to provide us with your updated volume data for all the TMC segments that you're purchasing from Enrix here or TomTom. As time progresses, the number of TMC segments that are provided to us by the data providers is going up, but the number of TMC segments that then have volumes associated with them is going down, which means the gap between those that have and those that do not is growing, which ultimately means that your user delay cost queries are becoming less accurate with time unless you're updating your volume data. So a number of states are working on that. Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Georgia's working on it now, Florida's working on it. It's just really important for you to try to do this, at least every year or so to make sure that the tools are working the best they possibly can for you. If you need help with this, send an email to support, and we will tell you how to get us your data in the right format. Now, things that we're working on right now, we've got a new project called Advanced Road Selection that's going to make it easier for agencies to use a mix of mapping and filters to try to narrow your road searches so that you're getting exactly the road that you want and filtering out the roads that you don't want in all of your queries. This is going to be more important for those of you who are using XD data from Enrix, but it's also going to help out TMC selections as well. We're also modernizing the detector tools analytics. So for those of you who are still providing us with your sensor data and are exploring that, we're migrating those away from requiring a flash player as well. We're adding after action reviews, documents, and other media to the event query tool page. And I think I provided an overview of that in our more recent user group meeting. We're also working on a big project with the Coalition and the Bureau of Transportation Statistics to add the causes of congestion pie chart to some of the Probe Data Analytics websites and tools. So you'll be able to go in and select your state or your region and be able to see what percentage of the congestion that's out there is caused by signal timing versus events versus work zones, weather, what have you. Now, that's exciting and should be out in February at the latest. There's other dashboard widgets that we're working on related to events and incidents, specifically clearance times and how many events or incidents you're having this month versus the prior month versus the prior year. And of course, I mentioned it earlier, if you're aware of transit data that's available from your state or your city or what have you, please point us to those transit data feeds, and we'll begin working to integrate that into our system so you can start to get the synergies from having both transit and other data in the system all at once. And with that, that's the end of my updates. Now's the part where we open up the floor for general questions to any of our presenters, but we also seek your input on what features you think are needed and you know, what it is that you think that we can do for you. So Jesse, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions, and we'll just kind of remain silent while people, you know, give us a brain dump, essentially.
Thanks, Michael. Yes, now's a great time if anybody has questions to start typing those in the chat pod. We do have a couple that I want to circle back to, so I will get to those, but if anybody else has thoughts or questions, go ahead and type now while we're covering those couple of things. Before we get into those, Michael, I just wanted to ask about the transit data. What do you need to be able to ingest that? Do you just need to know if there's like an RSS feed? Are there, you know, agreements that need to be signed, or sort of what's the process there?
Yeah, so we can easily ingest GTFS static and GTFS real-time data feeds. That's something that we generally do as a part of our RITIS contracts with agencies. If there's some sort of custom transit feed, that's something we'd have to explore further and try to figure out how expensive it might be to do that. But yeah, just GTFS data essentially is what we're looking for. But sometimes agencies publish those. Sometimes they kind of hide them. So we need people to help us locate those feeds. And in terms of any agreements that we might need to sign, that's generally more up to the data provider. We'd rather not have to sign anything.
Great. Sounds good. Okay, yeah, I'll follow up with you because I know SEPTA in our region puts out some data, so I will follow up with you on that. But to circle back to some of the questions that we had from a little bit earlier, I think this one probably goes to you, Michael, from Zoe Niederland. Hi, Zoe. Zoe is asking, and I think this goes back to a chart that I remember from a few years ago that sort of showed arterial data and kind of gave some guidance as far as what different thresholds of AEDTs on an arterial, should you be wary of, which are the best if you're going to do analysis. Also, should you look at a whole year, or, just is there any new guidance? I remember a chart that I think was sort of the good, the bad, the ugly, and kind of divided up arterials into, different levels of AEDT. So just wondering, as the data's evolved, has that guidance evolved as well?
Unfortunately, that guidance hasn't evolved. It needs to, because I think the instructions given back then are no longer relevant, because all the data providers have been increasing their probe data penetration rates, and the data is just better than it has ever been. But yeah, I think that's something we ought to maybe talk to the coalition about and see if there's a way to reinvigorate that study and see if we can update it for modern times. I think the problem, though, with doing that is, almost as soon as we do it, it's only going to last another year before it has to be done again to keep up with the changing data providers.
Michael, I believe that Denise can give you an update, but there has been updated work done on arterials, and I think it's going to be released soon. Denise?
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, Michael, there was an arterial report, I think, published in 2015, and Zach Vanderlaan actually has finished updating it to a 2019 version. The final draft, the draft has been edited, reviewed, and commented upon. We're just waiting for a final that we can release. So
excellent.
More information is coming, definitely. It should be within the next 2 weeks, actually, that we'll get that out.
Great.
Hey, while I'm on the phone, too, just to change gears slightly, is the TDADS project, Michael, talking about the congestion pie chart replacement, if you will. One of the dates that was not on the slides is that on November 21st, there's going to be a TDADS webinar. So if anybody within the RITIS user group is interested in getting an invite to that particular webinar, please feel free to send me an email, because I think that might be something that's very interesting for folks that are working with that type of data.
Can you remind people what that lovely acronym TDAD stands for?
TDAD means Transportation Disaster and Disruption Statistics. So if everyone, remembers that 2004 pie chart that we all used in operations that said a % of your incidents were due to crashes, a % was due to work zones, which was that pie chart, I believe, was done pretty much on modeled data. The project that the coalition is working with the CATT lab on, they are developing that tool that will eventually update that using more real data, if you will. So our second webinar is going to be held, it was just scheduled for November 21st, and I think that might be something of interest to the folks who are particularly in the RITIS user group. So please feel free to send me, Joanna, Michael Pack an email, and we will get you on that list for an invite.
Great.
And I think I had another question from Matt Glasser too. Anybody, if you know anybody who would be interested, they can, in any of these RITIS group meetings, in addition to that, they could just send their name along to Denise, their email address. We can get them added to the list. If they are a consultant working for an agency, let us know who they're working for. That's important for us to know too.
All right. It looks like we had a couple comments coming in about Ed and Tom were commenting on issues with the XD data, noticing some segments that were missing data. Michael, looks like you answered that, but just not sure if there's anything else you want to say there, or if there's anything folks should do if they notice that issue.
Yeah, if you notice anything, just write to support and we can check it out. There's only a few states that are using the XD data right now.
I happen to be one of the lucky few. It's good stuff. To circle back to another question that we got a little earlier, and I think this was directed to Scott. Scott, I'm not sure if you'll know the answer to this or not. The question coming from Maria, how is data used for regional planning efforts and investment of transportation projects and system improvements at PennDOT? So, Scott, not sure if that's really anything you would be involved with.
That's not my department.
Yeah.
I know we've been trying to get it, we allow planning folks to use it. We've been trying to promote it to our internal planners. I don't know how much they're using it. I know obviously DVRPC and all, I know the planning partners are using it, but as far as the specifics of that, I can't really do it.
Yep, I figured that as much, not one of your tasks that you have to work on. But I can touch on what we're doing here a little bit. We recently updated a set of criteria that we have to evaluate new projects that would be added to the Transportation Improvement Program or to the Long Range Plan. And so it looks at all kinds of different areas, everything from safety to land use to congestion, and, tries to align with federal performance measures as well as goals from our Long Range Plan. And so one of the things we're using for that analysis is through the PDA suite, looking at planning time index data that we compile for our congestion management process. So that's one of the criteria that we look at as we're evaluating kind of the trade-offs between projects potentially. So, so we have that data and we can evaluate individual projects to kind of assess, what is the reliability at that location compared to other candidate projects, to give us a sense of, is that a place where we're really addressing congestion. It's always tricky to sort of weigh the different goals that you have as you're programming projects. And then we're also working on some mapping that kind of visualizes all of that. So you can see where projects are planned and where candidate projects are with the PDA suite data. And the reason we went with planning time index is because for us it gives us a lot more coverage on our entire road network. We're a bi-state region. We have a lot of local roads. We have a lot that are on the NHS, but we also have some that aren't. So we wanted to be able to look at everything. So that's what we're doing. If other folks are using the data, I would be really interested to hear, and I think a lot of other folks at MPOs and DOTs would also be interested to hear what people are doing. So if anyone on the call has anything to add, go ahead and type those in. Otherwise, I don't know if we have any extra questions coming in here. Boy, people talking about missing data, talked about that a little bit. Last call, I guess, we'll put out for any additional things that people want to cover here. Anything else that Denise or Michael you want to touch on? We have a little bit of time here.
No, Jesse, I think I've covered everything. You guys did a great job as usual. I'll defer back to Michael if he has anything to add to wrap up.
Just to please remind everyone to send us your requests for new features, new functionality. Tell us what's not working for you. Nothing will get better unless you tell us those things. So be brutally honest with us, please.
Very generous of you, Michael. But, you know, it's true that we need to know how these tools are working for everybody in order to make them even better. So, you know, please, like Michael said, if you have feedback, everybody's always very much looking forward to hearing that. So I don't see anything else coming in here. I doubt anyone will object too much to ending a little bit early. So hearing no other comments, I think I'd like to just thank all of our speakers today. Really some great presentations, as always, kind of showing the diverse, different types of work that people are doing with this data. So thanks again for everyone who presented today. Thanks for everybody who tuned in today. If you have questions, here's all the contact information. As always, the presentation will be sent out afterwards, as well as a history of what was discussed in the chat pod. It will be posted on YouTube. There'll be an email to follow up with a summary. Am I missing anything, Joanna? I think that's all the follow-up items that will happen.
No, you got it all, Jesse.
All right.